Hi, I'm Todd Shelton,
And I'm Luke Jones.
and you're with Dev Workshop Programming. So tonight, Luke is just jumping right in and just gonna. What are you gonna?
We're gonna
He
make
never tells me.
we're gonna
anything.
make the magic happen.
Never
I
told
told
You
you.
never know what you're
I
doing.
tell you every time what we're going to do.
I mean, walk in, it's dim lit in here. You just like, hey, we're just gonna do something.
Okay. All right. Well, what we're actually gonna do is that in a previous lesson, a few lessons or episodes ago, we messed around with data and making it so we can make dynamic content. Well, we're not going to necessarily do the dynamic portion today. We're actually going to take a JSON file, which is a raw file of data, and we're going to use that to actually manipulate an element inside of our index.html file so it has different colors, different widths when you click on different buttons. Pretty rad.
Yeah. This is very important to understand how JSON can manipulate any kind of like HTML, in this case today, CSS.
You could actually build your whole website in JSON if you really wanted to.
Yeah, and it makes it easier to change sometimes.
Yeah, it's beautiful. But all right. So shall we get started?
Yeah, I like it.
All right. So as usual, if you want to find our templates, beginning, final, all that good stuff, look in the links below. You'll find them. We're just gonna go ahead and jump right in.
Yeah.
So as you can see here, I have my index file open on my right, and right now on my left, I have my app.js file open. We're not going to jump quite right into our app.js. We're actually going to start in our data.json.
Okay.
So like we've kind of done before when we did our data, all of our data is wrapped inside an array, which is what the square brackets are. It's very important that you keep these square brackets that we already have here in the document, or else when you write the objects, it's not going to read properly. This is important. So with our objects, we're going to make it like they're buttons. With each button, it's going to have a unique ID to it. It's going to change a width, and it's going to change a color of this rectangle inside of our index file. So we're going to go ahead and write our first object.
Okay.
And to write our first object, we use our brackets, not the square ones, the curly braced ones.
Okay.
And the first value we're going to type inside of our object is called an ID. I'll explain more about the IDs a little bit later, but we're just going to give it an ID value of 0, and then comma, and we're going to do a width. I'm going to make this 30%. Now it's very important that this is in quotations, even though it is a number. We need this in quotations. We'll get to that when we get to the JavaScript. And then the last thing we're going to do color. And just for right now, I really want to use that.
Don't do it.
Yeah, all right. I'm not. You know what we're talking about.
Rebecca Purple.
Yeah, that's right. We're just going to call it red because red's easy to spell. Yeah. But anyway,
I'm trying Rebecca.
All right. Don't let your dreams be dreams. All right. So we have our first object. Sweet. So before we type out our next objects, the ID in this object is representing the fact that this is an individual object. It has its own uniqueness to it that no other object is going to have. So whenever we're trying to call a specific object, we always know that the object with the ID of 0 is always going to have these particular properties. So I'm just going to copy that object. I'm going to put a comma afterwards. That's very important. And I'm going to paste it 2 more times with the last one not having the comma. And then I'm just going to change these IDs to 1 and 2. And then I'm going to change the width to 50% here, 80% here. Now the second one I'm going to do blue. Oh, why? Brr. I put an R and then blue. And then the last one, we're actually going to use a hex code. So I'm going to use the hashtag. I'm going to do FF00FF. There we go.
That's impressive.
I don't know. It's really not that impressive, but I impress myself sometimes.
Just to go back, recap. JSON, he started with the square brackets, which means that is an array. So each curly brace that you have in there, opening, closing, is an individual object. And then because those are in square brackets, a set of them, it turns them into an array. Right? So now we have an array of
Objects.
buttons.
For technically buttons, yes.
All right.
But all right, so awesome. We have our JSON file ready to go. We don't really have to touch this unless we want to add more buttons. But for right now, I don't think we're going to need any more buttons. I think 3 is enough. So with that, we're going to jump right into our app.js file, and we're going to get that JSON file.
Let's do it.
All right. So to get it, we're going to do $.get, and then we're going to do our parentheses. Now, you also could use .getJSON.
Correct.
Either one works. For right now, I'm going to use .get. But then after that, with the parentheses, we're going to do quotations, and we're going to do data/data.json. That is all you need.
Don't need anything else.
No. Don't add anything else. Please don't. And then after that, put a comma and then function. And then inside the parameters of this function, we're going to write in data. Well, what that means is that once it gets that data from the JSON, it's going to take all that data right there and make it into a parameter that we can use inside the function. And then after that, put our brackets, semicolon right there. Only thing we have to check now is make sure we're getting data. So I'm going to just do a quick console.log, and I'm just going to put data in there. And then I'm going to go ahead and open this up in Chrome. As you can see right now, I have this wonderful rectangle. And then if I jump over here, bingo. Inside my console, I have an array. The array's got 3 objects. Those objects have properties. And yeah, there we go. Super awesome. So we know we're getting our data. That's good.
Good.
So we go ahead and get rid of that console. There we go. Now we need to add our buttons.
Okay.
So where we're going to add our buttons is in this second half right here in the index. And right now, I'm going to go ahead and add an extra class to it. I'm just going to call it button container. Button container. And just make sure that with button container that we are camel casing, so the C in container is capitalized. Very important. So back to our app.js. We now need to write a for loop.
Okay.
So for, and just like we did before, we're going to do var I equals 0, because I, usual variable that we use for loops. And then I, when I is less than data.json, semicolon, and then I++. So this thing is going to end once it loops through all of the objects inside of our array, because it's going through the length, and then there you go. So now what we need to do is we need to write out the element in which we want to append to our button container. So just because I know this is going to get long, I'm going to make sure I squeeze out my app.js thing over here so I get all that room. So I'm going to do a var, and then it's going to be called button, and it's going to equal, and then using single quotations, I'm going to put the semicolon afterwards, we're going to go right out of div, going to make sure it's closed.
Okay.
Close is very important. And
yes.
Then, yes, we learned that the hard way. And then with div, we're going to do a class, and it's going to be a button. And then after that, we're going to do an ID. Now that ID is going to be a button, and then using single quotes inside, you've seen this before probably from our lessons, we're going to do our 2 pluses, and then inside the pluses, we're going to do data, square brackets, I.id. So what that's saying is that when we're looping through, from the data, we're going to get that particular object, which is the I. So if it's in the 0, it's going to be the first one. If it's 1, it's the second one, etc., etc. Then after that, we're going to do something that we haven't really talked about yet. We're going to do something called the data ID. And then inside of there, we're going to do single quotes, and then we're going to do 2 pluses again, and you probably can already figure out what we're going to do. Data I.id. There we go. Merry Christmas. So with the data ID, it's technically an attribute, just like classes and IDs are. Data ID is basically kind of like almost like a custom attribute. You can use it in pretty much any shape or form. If I really wanted to, I can call it button ID, and still, as long as we called it correctly later, which we'll get to, it's still the same. So we'll talk more about that later.
Okay.
But now what we need to do, we need to append this.
Okay.
So we need to call our button container, which now since I have that all written out, I can actually squeeze this back. And do $, quotations, call it by period because it's class, button container. See, it already knows that it exists. That's nice. And then .append. And then with that, we're going to append the button. There we go. So just a quick check. We're going to make sure that the buttons do exist. Refresh our page. Wait a second. I don't think I spelled button container correctly or something like that. Button.
You gotta spell everything correctly.
I know this is not going in my favor as usual.
Well, you know what? Debugging is an important part of every great app developer.
Yes, I know. I've learned this the hard way. All right, so now there's something I messed up on. This is kind of important, as you can probably see up here. Data.json is not the length of the data. Reason why it wasn't appending because obviously data.json is not a number. It's some sort of string. I don't even know what it's supposed to be. So what that actually needs to be is data.length. And once I do that, everything should go back to the way it was.
Okay.
So if I go back in tab, refresh, as you already see, I fixed it. Bam. I got 3 red circles.
Okay.
Right now on the style sheet, I have it set to that if we don't edit it through the JavaScript, these circles are always going to be red. So if I jump back into my JavaScript file right here, now what we're going to do is we're going to call the button by its ID when we're looping through. So to do that, we're going to do hashtag button, and then after that double quotation right there, do a plus, and then do data square brackets i.id.css background color, and then data bracket i.color, because we're going to grab the color.
Okay.
And if everything works out as it should, and I hope it really does, praise the sun, it worked. Thank God.
Going good.
Yeah, there we go. But right now we're clicking and they don't do anything.
Okay.
That's fine though.
Yeah,
that's supposed to happen.
That.
Yeah, we gotta fix that. So that's good. So now what we need to do, we need to add some interactivity with our buttons.
All right.
So after the for loop, now it's very important you do this after the for loop, because if you do it before the for loop, it's going to say, oh, when I click on these buttons that don't exist, it's going to do something.
Yeah.
So we need to make sure we do this after the for loop.
Okay.
So when we click on a button, and we do that by $, parentheses, quotations, dot button, and then a dot click, then inside of that function, where have I seen this before? What we need to do is we need to grab the button's data ID.
Okay.
All right. Now we're going to actually go ahead and change this into a variable. So we're going to do variable, and we're just going to call it data ID. We're going to camel case it with ID, or the I and ID being capitalized, and then we're going to call that attribute of data ID by doing this, using this, because we're getting this specific button's data ID. This dot ATRR, which is short for attribute, and then in quotations, data.id. Now there's one more important thing that we have to do here, is that right now, when we get this, it's actually going to get the data ID as a string. We don't want it as a string, because this will mess up how we're going to read something later. So jQuery's got this wonderful little thing called the number, and by doing that, we literally just type in number like this, and it's going to change that value into a numerical value. That's good. We need that. So next, we need, with that, now we can actually change the fill, which is inside of our bar right here. That's what we're actually going to be editing here. So we're going to call fill. Hi, Phil.
Hey, Phil.
And then we're going to do like before CSS. Now, this is going to get a little different than what you might see up here. Not that much different, but it's okay. We're not going to get too crazy. So first thing we're going to do, we're going to change the background color. All right, you probably have seen this before. Now, instead of doing the comma like we did up above, we're going to actually do a colon. And then we're going to do our property value that we want to change to. In this case, we're going to change it to the data. So data. Then inside the square bracket, we're actually going to do data ID. And then with that, we're going to do color. Then we do our comma afterwards. And then we're going to do width, colon, and then data ID. I'm going to change the width so I can see everything on one line. Width. So what I'm missing here from why we're getting the reds is that, so when I'm doing multiple CSS types inside of this CSS call with jQuery, I need to actually change it into objects, which is important. So with each property I'm going to change, I have to put brackets in between like this. So you see how the red went away from the first one. Now we got to add the brackets to the second one. And there we go. The red is gone. Now just taking in those as objects. And if everything goes as planned, please love of God here. Before I do anything else crazy. Yep.
And if it works, right?
All right, right now, so here's the good news. We are getting the buttons to change the width, or not the width, the color of our fill.
It's working.
It's working, but it's not changing the widths.
You're right.
What did I do wrong?
I have no idea.
I'm
sure it's something.
Let me check the data. Well, I magically got it working. I don't know what I did wrong. I probably misspelled something, but it's working now. But as you can see, if I jump back into Chrome, nice little animations right there, but it's changing the width, changing the color, all that good stuff. It's all magically through JSON. Debugging is hard. Debugging is something else, let me tell you. Anyway, it's pretty. You like it, Todd?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. It's definitely working pretty good.
Yes. You got anything else to add?
No.
No?
So,
I wanted you to add something. I really was looking forward to your comment, but you know, it's whatever.
I'm speechless.
I know. I usually make you speechless.
So let me ask you this. So why did we use the data-ID? What was important about that? Like, couldn't we have used just like the button ID or anything like that?
We could have. The reason why we used the data ID is because we were trying to grab the actual individual number. So we could have done it with the ID, and by using a bunch of different JavaScript stuff, we could have stripped down that ID so we could have just gotten the number, which we could have done. This just makes it a lot easier to digest. Obviously makes it a lot less code, so you're not writing a whole function to strip down this attribute to say, oh, I need to get rid of all the letters, and I just need the number, and then on top of that, make sure the number is not a string. This right here made it super easy, so we just grabbed the data ID, which was just a number, wasn't anything else.
Okay.
And then with the number call with jQuery, we made it so it wasn't a string anymore, made it super easy. And like I said, we would have probably had to write in a whole other function just to strip down the ID. So we could have gone to our button or our ID that was a button/number and stripped it down. But we don't have to do that, and that saved us a lot of lines of code. And as you can see, that only took technically 15 lines, at least with me, just with spaces. With spaces. You gotta have those spaces. You gotta have that clean code, sir.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
Yeah.
Now, there's another way you can do it. So Luke chose to do a for loop, and you can also do an each.
Yeah, you could do an each.
Which is a JSON, $.dot.each. Works exactly the same way, except for the key value pairs are a little bit different when you write the actual function. So either way, it works out.
Yeah.
And you just have to type it out a little bit different. So I think it's pretty cool. I think in the master one, though, you have a transition on the background color.
I do.
So how would we add that transition in there?
All I did with the transition, believe it or not, if I go jump into my style sheet.
Okay.
So I have the style sheet open.
All right.
In the dot fill, you can see all I got right now is a height of 100% because we want to make sure that's the height of that bar element that's being contained in, and we obviously don't want it to have a width to start.
Okay.
All I did was, if you remember, there's this wonderful thing called transition.
Okay.
I'm gonna do 0.5s.
Okay.
And then make sure that's all in there fine and dandy. Jump back in here, refresh my page. Uh-oh, wait a second. This did happen to me once. I had to refresh my project for this to actually occur, and I don't know why it's not working on mine. Is it working on yours?
It's working on mine.
My computer just doesn't like me today.
Yeah.
But if you add transition to CSS, it will make it so it has the nice little animation.
Yeah. Now you could, so like in your situation right now, if you do get that where it's kind of caching in there, you can actually hit Control-Shift-R on a PC or Command-Shift-R on a Mac, and that does like a hard refresh. So you can try that. And see if
Let's see what happens here. I'm gonna go tab over here, and then I'm gonna do
Command-Shift-R.
Command-Shift-R refreshes, and then let's go click the magic.
And then that usually like busts the cache.
Wizardry. What is this, Harry Potter?
It is.
I don't even know.
I like Harry Potter.
I'm not a huge fan. Might have to end the show early now.
Yeah, I think you're right.
But yeah, mine's working now. All right. Okay. But anyway, that's all I got.
Yeah.
And the cool thing is you can add more objects, add more colors, and like I showed, you can use the actual name of the color, you can use the hex code. If you want to really get nuts, you can add an RGBA, so you can even make it so it's got different opacities as long as you write it out as a string.
Right.
And just for gigs, just before we end the show, we have to do this for the sake of entertainment reasons. Yeah. We're gonna do it. So add an ID. I'm gonna get rid. So brace yourselves. I think I spelled it right. I don't know yet. Make it 90 width so we know it's actually doing something. All right. Jumping back in. I'm gonna do a hard refresh. I don't know anymore. I'm done. It's whatever. We're ending the show. I'm just gonna put my computer down like this now. But anyway, That's it. You got anything else, Todd?
No, I mean, I'm not sure I could top all that.
All right. Well, I'm glad you can't top it all. So until next time, folks.
All right, I'm Todd Shelton.
And I'm Luke Jones.
Have a great day.